we have someone that is attending this conversation. I'm happy now today to introduce and present Nicola Anthony and her work, Anthology of Displacement, that is currently now displayed in the gallery of Goma, Waterford. And thank you for being here, Nicola, and for having this conversation with me and talking better about, in general, your work, and specifically on this work that I think it's a great work in general, but specifically about the borders and breaking borders, the exhibition. It's fitting perfectly this topic, and is giving, I think, even a nice perspective on how these people that they are living across the border, how they are their life. And so I'll shortly maybe introduce you, but I think then it's good to give to everyone the chance to hear your voice, as you are the artist, and I think better than you who can explain your work. I will give some maybe touch about the exhibition Breaking Borders, and I want to all the time thanks the Goma, so the Gallery of Modern Art, for this opportunity, for the award, for supporting my curatorial practice, and at the same time the artists that I selected for this exhibition, that I'm really happy to have, because they are really well representing the idea that I had in my mind about the borders, and how all the time we are breaking these borders, even now using this Zoom conversation and these things. So thanks for everyone for being here, and I'll introduce so Nicola Anthony. She is a British artist. She is a sculptor, but she is, I don't know, sometimes I would like just to call her even a poet, because she is using even this installation with words. So is making words something real, so words that are always maybe floating, and they are something that maybe we can touch, but with her work it's possible to see and read and touch these words. So it's really interesting, her work, and she is really a great artist, and I would like just to give her the chance to talk about her work, and then maybe continue this conversation and have at the end some questions. So
thank you so much. That's a really very lovely and flattering introduction. I really appreciate it, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this exhibition. Actually, it has many meanings, doesn't it? Breaking borders and the various types of physical and emotional borders that we've all had to cross in the last couple of years, and in life in general. So yeah, I think it's a really important message, and it's been really interesting to see how the different artists have tackled that. So thank you.
No, thanks. I know how your agenda is very busy, and so I really appreciated that you are part of this exhibition, especially now that you are representing with your sculpture, and so this interactive installation in the pavilion in Dubai of the British pavilion. Yes. in Dubai. So it's a great opportunity to have such a good artist like you in this exhibition, and in general, I think in this conversation, because I think you can give so many inspiration to other artists, and so thanks.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, I've been crossing my own borders for the first time in 2 years, being able to travel actually in the last since the end of last year. So I did get to Dubai to do an artist residency there, which was fab. But I am back now from that. And in the middle of the pandemic, I moved from Ireland to the UK, hence why Valeria was saying that we met in Ireland, and this exhibition is in Ireland, and I feel very much connected there still. But I'm actually based back in the UK now, which is where my family is from.
Yeah,
is based.
So in this moment, I'm still in Italy, and I will move to Ireland really soon, next week. So it's a kind of this conversation, and I think this relationship between me and you, it is something that is really connected with the borders, and how we are always crossing and breaking these borders that are part of our, I think, life and activity working as curator and artist. So we are always crossing some kind of borders, physically, geographically, or just social, I think, in the arts. So regarding specifically this exhibition, I would like just to hear from you how this artwork was created, where your research is coming from about this anthology of displacement, and how you represented. So why, more than how why you represented this these words just in these jars that are beautiful, but they have, I think, more than a beautiful aspect, even a meaning that I think is very important to share with our visitors today.
Yeah, well, shall I quickly share a video of the work so that
yes,
it gives people the context?
Please. So
let me just see how to do that. There we go. So this is just more of a close-up of the pieces, which are glass vessels, and inside is the text, which is actually the stories of people who either live life on the border or have had to cross borders in their own life. So it's talking actually about quite challenging life stories. And I worked a lot with people who were in the direct provision, which is the asylum seekers centre in Ireland. So people who are really are being there as refugees but accepted into society. I wanted to represent their stories as something quite precious and fragile, that they had, you know, even that they'd shared those stories with me, it is something to treasure, but also something quite that they're quite contained, and they feel almost still imprisoned where they are now. So it's quite a challenging issue, actually, and I think we could get quite political about it, but I won't. But I think it also is symbolic of something wider that happens around the world to do with migration and displacement of people. So it is, as you mentioned, it's an artwork that has beauty to it, because I really try to represent that fragility and the complexity, and the fact that it's not just a straightforward story or experience as we travel through life. And in a way, I hope to sort of draw people in to look at that and to be curious about it. So I'm trying to curate how people approach that text and that story before they read it. And then when they read it, it can be a bit of a shock if it's a particularly challenging subject matter. So it's that duality, I think, between the delicacy and vulnerability of life.
Exactly, because that was my reaction when I saw your work. Firstly, at that time, I saw that it was something really beautiful and sort of really, it was kind of a treasure. You saw that, I saw that, and it was like, oh, wow, they are really interesting and beautiful objects. But then when I read the stories and how they are deep and how they are really something that they are connected with the story and history of so many people that anyway they are struggling around and across the borders, that vessel, that jar, that object that was so beauty changed completely in front of my eyes. It was turned completely, the meaning, and it was something that attracted me much more than, oh yes, it's a beautiful and nice artwork, but it's even something more and important to share. And I think that research that you did, it is still important, and it's representing a part of our present and not only of our past, because I think now with COVID, the situation with of migrants is even worse than before. So this is something that we should take care about about the others in general. So thanks for this for having shared this work and this exhibition in general, but I think it's important then maybe now listen from you. How did you get these words from these migrants? Because I know that you created something special again, an archive where you collected these voices.
Actually, that's a really good question, because it's part of my working process that I collect these stories, and I see it as a research and an ongoing archive, really, that I'm collecting. You could call them testimonies or people's stories. And so for this particular project, I was doing some workshops, art workshops, actually within with the people who are in direct provision, and I was just working with some people who were just trying to provide a little something different or a different skill to learn. And I often find there's this kind of exchange process where, and it's quite nice to be able to do that with art, actually, that if you all come together and do something creative, and I think it has to be something very low pressure, that there's no expectations to create something amazing, but just something crafty or creative, and that creates this collective and collaborative sense of belonging, and maybe builds up some trust, and it helps us to feel safe to share. And I always liken it to, those stitch and bitch sessions that have become popular at various points. It's coming together and then finding a community there, or finding a safe space and then wanting to share more. So I tend to just invite people in and introduce myself in that way, and try and give something, and then invite them if they would like to share their story with me. So it's this kind of, it's sort of an exchange, but I enjoy that as well, because it means that I can give something back. People obviously need to give me their permission to put their stories in the artwork, and they are always anonymous, the stories, which I think is also important. But apart from, perhaps if I need to take names out, I don't edit the stories, so that I'm just trying to present them very, very accurately. And I've got a website called the Human Archive Project. So it's humanarchiveproject.com, which is these stories that I've been collecting over the years. And because I collect them for not just this artwork, but for many artworks going back in time, I've sort of put them all together in the same archive. So it's very interesting, because it's all kinds of life challenges and barriers that people have faced, that they've overcome. And it becomes almost a very human, a sort of portal that tells those human stories. And I think that's really important. And it's a space where, because it is anonymous, I think people share quite deeply. So that's been, I always value that so much when people choose to share their story with me.
And another question, I don't know if it's something that it's interesting for me. It's like the Human Archive. It's something that you are collecting. So this anonymous, I like to say voices, because they are often people that they are without a voice. We are without any kind of voice, because they are migrants, so they are just looking for, so they are refugee, they are looking for a place where they could stay, and so often we are not able to listen their voices, and you are giving so to them this possibility to be part of your work, but in a certain way part of this discussion around the migrants and the direct provision, and anyway this human archive that it's important to have. And this human archive is giving you the inspiration for other works, so for other your sculpture installation that you usually maybe using always, if not always, often the words. So the human archive is giving you the inspiration for other works except this one specifically.
That's right. It's like almost my ongoing background research. I have to be honest that in the last couple of years, so at the beginning of sort of in Ireland and across the world going into lockdown, I opened up the Human Archive. So it's actually it's a website where anyone can go and anonymously donate their story. So I opened it up for people to share about isolation or how they're feeling. But I think there was just so much going on for everyone that I thought, actually, I've left it open and I have collected some stories, but I didn't try and push it. And, I didn't try and promote it to get people to share their stories, because I thought it was, I think it's stories we need to tell maybe further down the line.
But are you using some of those stories for other work?
Yeah. Would you like me to share some of those with you? Here we go. So if I just go through a few of these with you. So this piece is in Aspen in the USA. So that was around 2019 that I created this piece. And it's actually, was my first ever sculpture that involves Hebrew as a script. And for this, I worked with the local Jewish community and also the rabbi there to find some words and stories and quotes which capture their sort of ethos and mission in the world. And it was really interesting working with the local community actually to do this. And it obviously has to represent them very clearly, but also not too specifically, because it's about a community rather than an individual. So this is a permanent piece that stands there, and it's interesting because of the dual language. It was a very interesting process, and I made sure I had a translator and translation of that as well. And this is another permanent piece that's in Los Angeles, and this one is it's the story of one individual who escaped during the Holocaust, so he was a survivor. So again, it's quite a complex and difficult subject matter, and it's quite a long. It's not his whole life story, but it's a section of it. And the idea with this one was, so this is a good example of where I actually didn't collect this story myself, but I worked with an archive to use the stories that they've got. So it's based at the USC Shoah Foundation. So that's a body who works with Holocaust and other genocide stories, and it's a real research archive as well. So I worked with their stories, and this was one of the stories within that, and turned it into this piece. It's very tangled and complex, and one of the reasons behind that, a little bit similar to the piece you've got there in Waterford, is that I don't think any of these stories are straightforward. I think they're very layered, and I think if we're looking at a human being, they're not a document that we read and that's simple to look at. They're actually very complex. So the idea was to make this story quite tangled so that people can zoom in on different sentences here and there, and they have to work a bit hard and walk around the sculpture. Here we are looking up from underneath. So they have to do that, and they have to travel around to understand it.
And I think anyway is representing very well the complexity even of life, because this is the story of a person that who escaped from the Holocaust. So anyway, that's something that anyway is representing very well even the life, how it is, that it is unpredictable and so complicated, and all these layers of words, they are representing very well. I think even this aspect of the history of this person. And it's good to remember that today, for example, in Italy is the day of the memory, because we are remembering the Holocaust and all this. So what's happened in the Second War. So
yeah,
that's something
really,
yes.
Yeah, the timing is interesting, and
yeah,
that's really important. You've mentioned that the idea of memory and of the history, and obviously when we're looking back on things, there's also an element of, you know, what in this artwork one sentence will overlap with another, and that's also like life, that one event now links back to something that happened earlier or will happen in the future. And so I'm trying to get that aspect in there as well, of how all these events are interlinked, and the nature of memory as well, I suppose, is a bit like, so whether it's collective memory of this, or whether it's individual. That's just a little close up there. It's similar really for these pieces. This is was my solo exhibition at Singapore Art Museum before I moved back to Dublin, and these were stories of disenfranchised communities. So again, some pieces which went into the archive. So I spoke to people who were at that time in Changi prison, so inmates prison in Singapore, and I did go into the prison and do workshops with them, which was really very interesting, such a valuable experience. People who were sort of everyday people, taxi drivers and shop owners and that kind of thing, but also people from communities such as people struggling with obesity, and I also worked with a community of young adults who are facing terminal illness. So a whole varied group of people, and just that's just so, it's just so eye-opening and so interesting. It's such an interesting part of my work to gather those stories. And I'll just finish up on this piece, which is very similar to the ones you've got there. This was a previous piece, which is now in Hong Kong, and it was the stories of, again, of migrant workers, but more focusing on domestic workers, so like live-in housekeepers across Asia, which is another quite difficult area for people who don't have good human rights and don't have the law helping them to have a good standard of living. So that was their stories within these vessels.
So it's really interesting what you show, and at the same time it's nice to have today this connection and that you used to be in touch with people that are struggling, that they are always in this condition of being in between some strange situation and these borders, and especially remembering that today is the Day of Memory. That's of course in Italy what it is a heavy day, I have just anyway to say, for our past and the history. And it's good that you show this work today, especially in this day. So if no one has any question, really I would like just to really thank you for your work, that I think is really nice and precious, and it is a real treasure for our memory. Oh, now there is a question. Should leave now, but I'm looking forward to okay.
I think it's a goodbye.
Okay, it's
bye,
just
Seiko.
a goodbye. Bye.
Thanks for coming.
And yeah, so thanks, really thanks a lot for everything, for having shared this this nice work, and for being part of this exhibition. And yeah, and it is really an honor today have you in this exhibition, because it's always important to remember what happened, and it's good to remember through the words of these testimonies, and through your work, that they are making things in a certain way easier even they are very heavy, and that is what is attracting. For example, this is what I'm feeling. So the attraction for your work, that it's a nice work, but with so many meanings that they are behind. And so for that reason, it's difficult for me to describe you as just a sculpture, because you are so many things, I think. And maybe you can help me to introduce you better about your work and your practice, because you are so many things that it's difficult to give you a label, as it is usually. It is like a painter, sculpture. This is, no, you are so many. You are an artist with so many faces in a certain way.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good compliment. I think it's probably good to be a challenge, isn't it? Not to get pigeonholed into one thing.
Exactly.
So, and it keeps life interesting.
Yes, I think it's more interesting to be so many things more than be just one thing, or just be only a, I don't know, only a sculpture, but making this work, making words real and concrete as you are doing. It's unbelievable, because I like to use how you are using the words and how you are manipulating anyway this sculpture, and how people, they can approach freely anyway to your work and have different emotion and reaction. So that is I think the most important thing in your work, and you demonstrating very well. Even I didn't see your work in Dubai, but I think it's again something that is showing very well how you are working, acting and reacting with what is surrounding us, and you are giving so a nice aspect to all this challenging anyway time.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that. It is very difficult, isn't it, to have to read the news and to hear the bad news, and it can be very negative. But I think it's important to talk about those things. But if I can help people approach it with a different mindset, or in a more gentle way, that they see the human story, not just the stats and the figures and the headlines, then I think that's what I try to achieve with my work.
Thanks a million again, and thanks everyone for being here, and yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. See you next Thursday with Bernadette Hopkins, so another appointment. Thank you again.